Welcome, folks. Today we're going to be discussing one of Shakespeare's most famous plays and his maybe most well-known fantasy play. We're going to be talking about The Tempest, and we're going to be giving a little bit of our own reactions, talking about some authorship questions, and just talking about general themes and characters that are in the play. Stick around.
And so welcome back everyone to another episode of Apocalypsis Historia, and we are finally diving in proper into actually some Shakespeare content itself. I know we've made our name and case here in the Shakespeare arena, but we've never been like, all right, let's read some actual Shakespeare. I guess we've done some sonnets, but I feel like the plays are still where it's mostly.
We had our read these 8 plays video.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't actually get to do any analysis of. Well, we talked generally, but we didn't do any close reading analysis.
Yeah. So this is the first one. I feel like it's not probably a one that people would maybe dive into first, but at least what I really liked is that it's really short. It's like a really quick read.
Absolutely.
If you can just kind of get past the linguistic registry that's kind of going on there. But yeah, as far as literally content, really, really short. Like, hold up the book, we got a little paperback here, which is not very big in of itself anyway. But it's only like the middle third and not even like maybe the middle quarter. I don't know. It's really, really, it's like 80 pages or something like that.
Yep.
So we read some like essays on this that are like longer than that on this channel.
Yeah.
So, I guess just to kind of start us off here, why don't you just tell everyone, as you're our Shakespeare sort of proper scholar here, just a quick synopsis and summary of the plot of The Tempest.
Okay. Well, first of all, a quick shout out to Anderson and Savannah, who, did suggest The Tempest and said he'd really like to dive into it, and he suggested it specifically because we've been doing all this John Dee talk, and we'll go into that later. But whether we're talking about Prospero, the main character, or one of the main characters of The Tempest, or John Dee, they're these wizard figures. And so The Tempest is about this sort of super smart magician wizard type dude who used to be a duke over in Italy and then got banished by his brother and the king, who was tricked by his brother. And when he got banished, he got sent off to some random island out in the middle of nowhere, and him and his baby daughter, which, shout out to you, you got a kid, and it's like, what would it be like if, it was just you and her, and you didn't have the other kids, didn't have your wife, y'all were stuck in the middle of nowhere. I know you think about that kind of survivalist stuff a lot, so, Prospero's, living that life, and he lived that life so well that he's not only survived, he's become this magician type dude. And it's not entirely clear when he gains this sort of knowledge and these powers.
I thought they said in the beginning that he had some time to kind of spend time doing some magic-y woo-woo stuff, and maybe that's also like where he lapsed, I thought, and maybe realizing his brother was about to like backstab him essentially, or something like that.
He does seem to start to devote himself while he's a duke still. He quits kind of worried about politics and just dives, neck deep into a bunch of alchemy and magic and occult stuff, and he's like trying to learn, magic to do this kind of really great, powerful stuff. And when he's doing that, that's when, you're right, his dukedom gets snuck out from under him, he gets banished and blah, blah, blah. But it seems like he had to still hone those powers, because if he is at all as capable as he is by the time the story is told, back when he's getting banished for the first time, they wouldn't have been able to banish him, because Prospero is he's like Dumbledore powerful. He's and we'll get to that in a second. But so he's banished. He's a super powerful wizard. He's got this daughter Miranda who took her when she's a baby, but they've been banished for years, and so we're now she's like 16 or 17, and they've been there the whole time. There's one other two other people, but they're not really people. Ariel's this sort of sprightly fairy figure that's sort of androgynous. It's a guy, but there's this sort of androgynous quality to it. I guess maybe that's heightened by the fact that Disney's Little Mermaid is Ariel. We think of Ariel as a girl's name, but not fully a person, kind of a fairy. And then Caliban's like this, the son of a witch, and like the slave of Prospero, and is sort of this kind of monster character. So neither of them are technically people, but those are the only people or things or entities on this island for forever. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all these people start landing on the island, and it's because Prospero knows that nearby ships are sailing near their island, and he's able to wield his magic and make their ships crash and make them land on this island, and everything ensues from there.
And that's how the play opens up, is a bunch of dudes on this ship as it's like going down.
Yeah.
And that was like, once again, I had watched the movie version. I didn't even watch the whole thing. I watched like the first 15 minutes of
Julie
it.
Julie Taymor's, 2010 or 2011?
Something like that. And I watched like the first 15 minutes of it. Wasn't super keen on finishing it. But and then I started.
We can talk about the movie review too.
And then I started reading the play instead. And as I'm reading it, I only have the movie as a reference now. So I'm like, I feel like I'm cheating. That I'm not, like, I can only understand. I was eventually started to kind of pick it up and, revealing my IQ here or something. But no, I don't know. It's just, it was hard for me to actually picture what was going on. Once it kind of moved away and we were back on the island, it's like, okay, I'm actually, I can kind of tell what between Prospero and Miranda's going on. But, like, the sailor jargon was, like, really throwing me for a loop.
The boatswain doing all his jargon. It's like, is he angry? Is he excited?
Yeah,
is what's happening bad or is it good?
Right,
What is happening?
Yes.
And I think, like, going back to the video that we just recorded and the couple videos that we just released, we talk about this, Frances Yates talks about it in her book here, this movement towards spectacle. And, like, this is one that definitely requires a little more spectacle than other Shakespeare plays.
Yes, like, I noticed, I was trying to notice some of the stage
as well
directions.
As a closet drama.
Yeah, the stage directions kind of just had a lot more, like, not so they leave, they come, or they stab, or whatever. There was a lot more, like, they do a this, and they do a that. And then,
like, very specific, like, the boat comes in here, and, like, we have to get a little bit of visual direction, I think, or else you have to have some context, predisposed context, because, it starts out in this heavy jargon. The characters that it starts out with, like, aren't really our main characters, and
there's so many of them too. You're like, they're just kind of spouting them off, and I was like, well, what the heck is going on?
Like, it's not the biggest cast, but with it's basically just three subplots of people, right? We get Prospero, his daughter, Ariel, and then Caliban leaves them at some point, but then Ferdinand, who's a prince, the son of the king, gets shipwrecked and lands on that island, and so he's part of that little subplot. The other subplot is the Stefano and Trinculo, who's like the butler and the jester of the king. They get lost, and they come upon Caliban, who's left this group, and those three are together, and they're drinking and being silly for most of the play. And then the third subplot are the characters that we mostly start out with. That's Antonio, who's the brother of Prospero, and he's the one that kind of screwed over Prospero, and the one that's basically our villain, right? And I say basically our villain because it's not one of these super explicit, powerful villains like Iago or Aaron the Moor or something like that. It's he's like, honestly, no shade, the weakest villain in Shakespeare. Like, Antonio, like, he did a bad thing, but, like, that's about it. Like, he's not threatening, he's not cool, he doesn't really have that much agency in the play. And so there's Antonio, and then right with Antonio is this other guy, Sebastian. And if you thought Antonio wasn't important, Sebastian, I have no idea why Sebastian's in the play. Like, there are reasons the Antonio's in the play. Obviously, you got to have something of a villain character. They probably could have, maybe mashed Antonio and the King together, except that would make Miranda and the Prince have to be cousins, but that never stopped them before. But, you could just get rid of Sebastian wholesale. So it's interesting, and I do wonder what he's about and what he stands for, maybe from both a mainstream sense and, our authorship question, allegorical sense. So, we can maybe dive into that. But, yeah, you got Sebastian, Antonio, and then there's the King, who's with him. And then you also have, Gonzalo?
Yeah, and he's this older
he's kind of like a
guy.
friar kind of guy or something.
Yeah, or he was some sort of attendant or counselor dude or something like that.
I like Gonzalo. He was a decent character.
Yeah, he's the one who's supposed to be the empathetic one.
Yeah, he's the only one that's a decent human being. The King's just stupid and stuck in his ways. Antonio's just a jerk, and Sebastian's
psychopath, just
just the jerk's buddy.
Well, here we go, killing again.
All right, Sebastian, you freaking weirdo.
Yeah.
So I genuinely wonder what that's about. But going further, okay, so we got
crash,
we got these three subplots.
Wreck.
They wreck. It turns into these three subplots.
And then we're introduced to Miranda and Prospero, and they just expo dump all the stuff that you just told us, and he's just
a lot of expo
and he's just are you still listening? Okay, here's the next part.
Yeah,
he's like, girl, are you still listening? And she's like, yes, your words could cure deafness or something. Or your tale could cure deafness.
Yeah, that is exactly which. Doubtful.
Yeah, or definitely could cause blindness. So reading this,
which it's funny because some of that's the most interesting stuff. When he starts going on about Caliban's mom, Sycorax, that Ariel used to have to work for. What is that? That's fascinating. Who is Evil Witch Sycorax? What was happening then when she's plaguing the land like some evil Lord of the Rings Nazgul sort of thing? Where's that play? I want the Sycorax play.
No, I think there's actually a modern play that they're doing now. Think of Wicked, and that's the
malevolent thing.
And exactly, and I think that they're actually doing that now
with Sycorax.
It's titled Sycorax, I'm pretty sure.
Oh darn! Thank you, because it's $1 million idea, and I'm just too lazy to do it. So somebody else better.
Ian, report status check on how good this thing is or not.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah,
take one for the team.
He's off in Memphis watching the tour version of Sondheim's Company. So we'll get that. Company's one of the few musicals that that's cool, that's smart, I get that, I like that. So Company is what we call my number one play, so I'm interested to see what this take is. Sondheim's called the Bard of Broadway. He gets the comparison. There can be a comparison to Shakespeare to a musical writer. Some people might find that ridiculous. Some people of course you can make that comparison. But yes, Stephen Sondheim is the Shakespeare of Broadway, if you will. Said I think he's more of the Ben Jonson. I think there's some reasons to say that, but okay. So
the Sycorax, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
They'll mention it a little later, but they also worship some god that's got some kind of crazy name. It's Sedagast or
Sedagast or
something like that.
So what happens? They're expo dumping. Miranda's gone her whole life not knowing why they're on this island, and then all of a sudden Prospero's now is time to tell you, Harry, you're a wizard, or
I'm a wizard.
Yeah, we get that very much Disney moment of, the hero's journey where you thought you were just like everybody else and you thought your world was normal, but it's not. And clearly Ariel's world isn't Miranda's world isn't normal, but to her it's totally been normal, and this is this moment where she's initiated to the truth of things, and the truth of things is that her dad's a famously powerful man that's been horribly wronged, and he's had this giant plot for vengeance. What Miranda thought was just regular life was Prospero's 15-year vengeance plan. and it's all getting to finally come into fruition. Oh, Setebos, thank you. Yes. So yeah, it's finally getting to come to fruition. And so what happens is Ferdinand, the son of the king, he's separated from the king. They all think Ferdinand's dead.
And this is all done because, and that's when Ariel gets introduced after him and Prospero and Miranda are done talking. He's like, "Oh, Ariel, come over here." And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I did everything you asked me to." So he's like the one. Ariel is actually the one that caused the storm, but then also displaced all those dudes exactly how
kept them alive during the storm.
Yes.
He's able to make them think that they've gone through this horrible trauma, but they wind up on the shore, clothes completely dried, like they've never been wet or dirty in their lives. And it's like, what's we can go into a take on that in a little bit, but just get through the summary here. So Ferdinand leaves the king, or he's separated from the king. The king and all them think that Prince Ferdinand's dead. Meanwhile, Prince Ferdinand happens upon Prospero and Miranda. Miranda and Ferdinand fall in love at first sight, very quite literally, in the most tropey sort of ways, and it's a little nauseating. Like it's not great by at least my own standards, but like it is hitting a trope, and it is sort of helping to solidify her, and maybe there's some ways to make ironical readings on it or something, but I do want to say that I think it's interesting. You think Ferdinand's dead, but Ferdinand's alive, and we've been going on about Ferdinando Stanley. Well, if some people want to date the Tempest much earlier than 1607, 8, or 9, and if we date it to the, earlier to the 90s, there may be something to that. Represent Elizabeth Stewart and her new spouse, Electric Frederick. So there may be something to that as well.
That's just what the basic wiki
says.
Says.
That's the mainstream take on it.
And then the all the guys are displaced. You got Caliban, who was also introduced prior, and that's when you find out that he's working for Prospero as a slave, basically, dude. He gathers all their firewood or something like that.
Yeah.
And that Caliban's mom was the witch Sycorax, and that she had imprisoned Ariel at some point for disobeying her. So Prospero, apparently, I don't think he even interacted with Sycorax. I think Sycorax was already gone by the time he even gets there. But yeah, he's the one who sets Ariel free, and that's why she's sort of in debt to him, or he's still got some sort of sway or power over her. So yeah, then he's like, all right, I'll set you free in 2 days or something. Just keep up with the plan.
Yeah.
So she goes off. That's when you find Ferdinand. Well, Ferdinand, I feel like the next time you see him, he's all of a sudden he's just with Miranda. But Ferdinand's carrying firewood or something like that. He's Prospero's making him do stuff.
Yeah, he's making him earn his keep. And
Yeah.
He's not immediately nice to Ferdinand because he's he's got to kind of prove his mettle or something.
Right.
And to the point where Miranda's like, Dad, you're kind of being a jerk a little bit.
Yeah.
It'll make sense.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, their subplots, it's got some nice sonnet lines and got some of this really nice love poetry stuff, but it's pretty empty and insipid. It's a little too lovey-dovey saccharine, and there's no real conflict.
Yeah,
the only conflict is just that Prospero, if he wants, he can make them not fall in love, and it's yeah, but he wants them to fall in love. That's why everybody's here, so or that's why those two are in the place they're in. So there's no real conflict with that, and that's why you're just kind of it's almost like a character study, but they're not really these interesting, nuanced characters. They are very tropey,
one-dimensional
Disney formula, so moving on.
So you see Caliban meet up with Stefano and Trinculo.
Yes.
The jester and the butler meet up with the savage slave indigenous guy.
That's how it's showed in the movie. I like to read him as like, an Igor monster character type. I don't necessarily want to make this, although there may be some actual historical truth into that sort of reading, that it's some savage cannibal thing, that Caliban itself may be a anagram for cannibal, and but like it. If so, it's this. Yeah, it is this real horrible amalgamation of all the otherness of the global South that isn't, Western Anglo England and and into one. But I don't, just read it like a weird little Pokemon monster thing. Like, you don't have to make all these post-colonial readings if you don't have
I think they banned that Pokemon.
And so, the Julie Taymor version, she cast Jimon Hansu, who's like famous for playing like the noble savage character.
Yeah.
And so it's like she's very clearly trying to flip this noble savage on its head, but like I don't know, if you're not informed of that like historical discussion and that like literary discussion, it may just come across as racist to you.
It's because it says that Sycorax was a witch from Algiers. It specifically says that, so it's specifically saying this witch is from this part of.
Okay, so yeah, she is technically African or
French, African,
Moorish.
Or Moorish, yeah.
Jimon Hansu's definitely like, if you're gonna go into an ethnic discussion, he does not count as an Algerian ethnicity. Jimon Hansu, I don't know exactly where he's from, but. Okay, yeah, I would not have guessed Benin, because Benin's not a very popular country. Where is Benin? That's right next to Togo, which is right next to the Ivory Coast. So yeah, he's West African. Okay, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, like it's possible. Like I'm sure there's probably plenty of sub-Saharan African people in Algiers in the early modern era. Like I'm sure that's possible. So like it's probably not a super ahistorical casting, but yeah, I think she cast Jimon Hansu to specifically like flip the noble savage thing on its head and show that like, yeah, this is what Caliban's portrayal probably was to Shakespeare in their time. But it's like, what the hell? I don't want to see that. Like, or I know a lot of other people won't. Like, it doesn't really bother me, but I know I'm gonna try and show it to, like, if I show that to my students, like, no, they're gonna burn me on they're gonna put me in the pillory. Like, no, my students, who are mostly ethnically Hispanic and black, don't want to see white man teacher like showing them every character in the movie like has agency, humanity, is white, and then yeah, Caliban the monster. Like, they didn't even make Ariel Ariel's like it's only so I don't know.
And he looks really weird in this version of the movie.
Well,
he's got this weird skin kind of thing going on or whatever. It's hard to explain.
It's like he's a monster because he's the son of Cain. Anybody that's the son of Cain in sort of medieval European belief, you're ignored or forsaken or cursed by God, and it sort of ties into some of that Mormon philosophy of skin tone, with Native Americans and African Americans were cursed by God, and so therefore that's what Julie Taymor is bringing up in this portrayal and this discussion, and that's like really heavy duty, like hardcore post-colonial theory. It's kind of what Toni Morrison applies to J.R.R. Tolkien, which is absolutely fascinating discussion. Some discussions on Toni Morrison talking about Beowulf and J.R.R. Tolkien's take of Beowulf, and talking about how to portray things racially, and but that said, like
this weird cracked skin going on.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels a little too otherizing for my taste. It doesn't help that yes, this is directed by a white lady, and very clearly it's directed by a white lady because a white lady is now our main character, where it's not usually our main character. Like, if you're wondering the whole time, why is Prospero Helen Mirren? It's like, because Prospero's not a stand-in for John Dee in this movie. Prospero's a stand-in for Julie Taymor herself. This is a movie about Julie Taymor, which, you know, I got mad respect for Julie Taymor. She's a big-time Broadway director. She's like one of the most successful ever because she made The Lion King Broadway, which is by far the most money-making Broadway play of all time. Like, it's always the most successful. It's been out for, 20, 30 years. Still, every week makes the most money. But she's also the maker of the biggest flop in Broadway history, Spider-Man Into the Dark, which was a PG-13 or R-rated Broadway musical about the dark side of Spider-Man, featuring music written by U2.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it sounds like an absolute nightmare. It sounds like just an absolute nightmare.
Is this like a Rick and Morty joke or something?
So no, there's a scene in South Park has their episode Broadway Bro Down, where they make fun of Broadway. There's a scene in it where Randy Marsh comes in and ruins the Broadway show to make sure his daughter doesn't perform certain kind of acts on her boyfriend. And so he needs to ruin the show, and what he does is he comes in this horrible Spider-Man outfit, and he's like trying to save her in a Spider-Man outfit. That is a reference to Julie Taymor ruining Broadway with Spider-Man Into the Dark.
Oh my god, you're kidding me.
No.
That's so too funny.
I didn't know that until I made Ian watch that episode, because Ian's not the biggest fan of South Park. But I was like, no, this one's all about, Broadway. You got to check it out. And they actually, him and his boyfriend, they freaking loved that episode, and they're like, yeah, it's got all these references, and they were pointing out stuff that I didn't. Oh, that's why he's wearing a Spider-Man outfit? I thought he was just being drunk, stupid Randy. But yeah, so Julie Taymor,
oh my lord.
She made the Titus movie starring Anthony Hopkins from 1999.
Oh,
and that movie's a weird, bizarre trip as well, but the trip all adds up to something, and the weirdness isn't just pasted on. And whereas this one, not to go too much in my review of it, but yeah, this is more just kind of basic formulaic Tempest with some weird switch out takes on it. And so it's it's all formulaic except for now Prospero's a chick, or except now Caliban's a really racialized take on the role, or now Ariel's specifically going to be portrayed as a homosexual guy or transsexual guy. Ben Whishaw always plays pretty much homosexual characters in everything he plays. He's the guy that plays Richard II in the BBC Hall of Crown series.
Okay.
And I almost always like Ben Whishaw. I do always like Ben Whishaw, except for I didn't like Ben Whishaw in The Tempest, and that kind of speaks to my reaction.
It's just you'd have to watch movies. It's just kind of weird the way that it plays out and the animations that they do. Anyway,
to go back to our summary.
So yeah, Trinculio, Stefano, and Caliban all meet up. Caliban starts worshiping Stefano because he gives him alcohol.
Booze, yeah, he starts getting drunk. He's never had booze before, and he's like, whoa, this is awesome.
And then he's like, okay, we'll go kill Prospero, and then I'll lick your feet forever.
Yeah,
that's what he says.
Yeah, he's like, these guys are more powerful than Prospero. They got this super magical potion that makes me feel like, I'm super strong, and then they're like, yeah, we'll be king of this island. That'd be great. And of course, they've never seen Prospero. They don't know any better, and they're dumb drunkards. But to me, they're the most fun of the play. I enjoy when we're there. I don't really care if their plots to get Prospero are gonna hurt him or not. Of course, they're not. They're idiots. But
obviously, yeah, they have the comedic relief where it's Ariel, sort of talking, and two of the characters think it's Trinculio talking, and so Stefano's like, dude, stop talking, and Trinculio's like, I didn't say anything,
starts starts attacking him. It's that's funny.
He has him walk a certain feet away, and he's like, all right, don't listen, or all right, don't say anything this time, and
they're
both, it's sort of like a stage gag.
They're both kind of funny characters anyway.
Yeah.
And they're funny in their own kind of distinct ways, and so I don't know. I enjoy the moments with them. Ultimately, is it the most important thing? No. Is it the funniest thing in Shakespeare or in Renaissance? No. But it's enjoyable. It's nice. And it's it's a distinct Shakespearean kind of version of that scene, because you'll get similar versions in Heywood or Dekker, that kind of thing, but it's got a specific Shakespearean kind of vibe to the diction and the way that, they're kind of arguing and butting heads and, and sometimes it's not always as funny as it could be because it gets lost in being too linguistic and that sort of thing. And but I don't know, I enjoy those scenes. For me, what's worse than honestly the flat love story, or good but not great comedy. What's worse than all of that, which I'm now making it sound like the Tempest is a bad play. The Tempest is not a bad play, but the villain characters. That's the third subplot. We got these villain characters that they're kind of lost. They don't know where they're at. The king's just wandering, trying to find his son. And then at some point, Antonio and Sebastian are like, wait, dude, we already get rid of your brother. Like, what if we just get rid of the king here? Nobody would know. You could be king. But that kind of happened. That happened so late in the play that that there won't be much time to develop it, because we had to do so much time for the expo dumping, because as we said, it's only 85 pages. So if we spend the first 20 or 30 expo dumping about Sycorax and Caliban and stuff, and then we have to spend another good chunk of having Miranda and Ferdinando fall in love but not get to totally be together, how much time do we have for this sort of villainry to unfold? It's not something that happens at the start and we get to watch it unfold like Iago and Othello or Richard III. It's kind of thrown in pretty late, and it's oh, wait a second, dude, we've been wandering around this island. Maybe that's what our subplot is. We're trying to kill the king. It's almost like they, and so it feels a little late. But yeah, so they start wandering around right when they're maybe going to be able to kill the king. Everything all converges. All these people come together.
And Ariel's playing,
masterminding them.
Supposed to be invisible. Playing tricks on them and putting people to sleep and then waking them up at the last second.
Yeah.
And just doing a bunch of essentially
little kind of magic tricks.
Yeah, marionetting everything, and then there's a lot, like I said, the stage directions, because then I remember that at some point they'll have Prospero up in the top box area. They have some other stage area that's up near the top, and he's doing a bunch of stuff, and they have all these other actors, all these fairies or other spirits. It was really obtuse the way they were sort of introducing all these other elements, and they're deities. They had some other word, I can't remember exactly what they used. But yeah, all these other spirit things doing stuff. Well, they're supposed to be, the stage direction says they're dancing around or masquerading and doing something, but
it's funny, what you're describing reminds me of my buddy Ian talking about some of these plays where he'll be like, the material itself wasn't that great, but I loved the play. And it's wait, what? The script wasn't very good, but I loved the play. And it's what do you mean by that? And it's what he always reminds me is there's such a visual aspect to it to maybe defend the Inigo Jones mindset.
Mm-hmm.
That there's so much photography, lighting, staging, music, costuming, set design, and that your theater experience is dependent on those things as well. You're not just reading a book, and how much that does or doesn't affect your mindset affects how you take in that script or book. And so I think that, as we were talking about in another podcast, where it's we get this movement around the time of the Tempest towards spectacle that that's very literally, like you said, it's in the stage directions that the spectacle is structurally interlaid in the play.
Yes.
It's not just somebody's directorial take on it.
Right.
It's
right
within the play. That has to happen for the kind of full meaning or effect to take place. And so, like I said earlier, it just doesn't work as well as a closet drama, because it's you have to sort of experience all these people sort of doing the stuff, some guy from up on high doing stuff, and
some of the jokes don't work. For instance, there's one point where this is not even, I don't even know, but it's not even relied on the super stage special effects, but for instance, Tranquillo hides under Caliban's jacket or something like that, so it'd be me sneaking into the jacket you're wearing right now, and there's something where he's oh look, yeah, your drink will calm me down from shaking because it's not Caliban shaking, it's Tranquilio like hiding under his shirt. But like there's a big disconnect. It's like, okay, like I can't see that happen, so the line's not clicking, obviously, right? Because there's an extra note about like, and that has to have the extra note at the bottom telling you like, oh, Tranquilio is the one shaking underneath the robes that he's wearing. It's like, well, that kind of deflates like a lot of what, as a at least a reader in that sense, right? So
and like I don't know, you can almost see like I have the same thing as you when I read it, or when you just see somebody stage it like in the movie. It was like, this is kind of like, I think they just had like a blanket or like a tablecloth or something over the guy, and the other guy goes and lays under it, and like it's like, what is that? That's silly, but like you almost want to say that they must have had some cool, neato way to stage this effect. Yeah, and that's
they
been
had something
lost
in
on
mind.
us.
Yes,
That some little gag, like almost like they had a pair of fake legs sticking out or something, and you stand in the box and you can move the thing and make it look like you're moving. I don't know, some weird stunt like that where they have a big pair of pants and each person can stand in a leg. I don't know, something like. It wouldn't literally be that, but something silly like that where it's some preconceived mechanism where and then all of a sudden this cool illusionary effect happens.
Yes.
Otherwise, it reads pretty stupid.
It was in the Goodbye 2023 episode that we were reading some from I was quoting from The Theater of the World by Frances Yates. And she was just talking about the Inigo Jones character who elaborated all these crazy scene changes and mechanisms for special effects and whatnot. But Ben Johnson was sort of railing against that sort of movement away from the orator theater, kind of focused plays to this more like we're depicting here, this spectacle. It's all about the eyes, what the eyes see, and not so much all the poetry, maybe in some cases. It's more like that's just getting us from A to B here,
Right.
But I kind of coming off that and then reading this and just kind of like seeing it and just these don't have a lot of the same zinger lines that you'll find in Macbeth, that you'll find in Hamlet, that you'll find in all the Henrys and Richards, I imagine. Because even the big lines are the ones that we remember, like, oh, Brave New World. Well, that's just a throwaway line that Miranda's saying. Yeah. It's not some like super, kind of, eye-opening epic speech. He's just kind of just saying it. It was like a one-liner, just off or whatever. There is a cool line where it's talking about, and that's where to get a little more meta stage here. It does have a bunch of just talking about the micro macro or the sort of a fourth wall breaking thing, because it mentions like the globe itself and blah blah blah. But so it's very self. Realized or whatever. Yeah. Self-aware.
Yeah, well, we steal by line and level. That's another good line. That's Trinculo saying that, and so it's like, oddly, like some of the best stuff in this is what should be the stupid, silly subplot comic scene. Like, ends up being some of the best stuff in here. Like, I do love when Prospero starts waxing poetical and like the noontide sun called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azured vaults set roaring war. To the dread rattling thunder have I given fire, and rifted Joe stout oak with his own bolt. The strong braced promontory have I made shaken by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers oped, and let them forth by my so potent art. But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it in certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. And that's Prospero's farewell speech and saying I'm done with magic forever, and I don't need to do it anymore. Like that. That's awesome. That's a great little. But that's the end of the play. And Any other scene where Prospero gives speeches like that, they just don't quite have the import that analogous scenes do in other plays. Like when Coriolanus or Menenius, and who's Coriolanus' like father figured kind of thing. When he's when they're waxing poetic and stuff, like, so much is at stake in the play. Like, what they say and how they say it makes a huge difference to what happens in the play. Prospero could speak in Chinese for this whole play, and it wouldn't change what does or doesn't happen, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Things
it's
are
all,
almost like...
the dominoes have already been falling at
Right.
this point, so yeah, most of the dramatic tension is kind of
between
gone.
Prospero and Ariel, like, they can do exactly what they want, and you're just
yeah,
there for their ride.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because when Sebastian and Antonio are like, "Oh yeah, let's go do some murdering," and scene change in the audience, like, "Oh," and Prospero's like, "Yeah, maybe, probably won't be a big deal."
Yeah,
I guess, I guess I should have assumed.
You ever heard of the movie The Thomas Crown Affair?
No. Maybe I haven't heard of it, but
there's two versions. There's the original version, and then there's the 90s version. The 90s version starring Pierce Brosnan. Don't bother with that one. I'm talking about the original Steve McQueen one from 70, 60... Well, it's not that important, but the original Thomas Crown Affair. It's a neat little movie. It's super stylistic. It's where so many of our, like, heist type tropes come in, where you get the peel away kind of doon, and then you get the cuts and the montage. Like, so much of that's from Thomas Crown Affair. But
okay.
The problem, or ironic choice of words, the movie's awesome, except there's no conflict in the movie. Like, the main character he's one of these heist guys, and he's gonna steal some stuff, and he does, and then he's gonna steal some more stuff, and then he does. And then he steals more stuff at the end of the movie. And it's like, where was the problem? What was the thing? Like, it feels a little bit like that in The Tempest.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. Like, they're in love, and yeah, he's going to get his thing back, and they're lost. Like, everything's going to fall into place.
What would have been a cool fourth wall break that I'm thinking about is that, so Ariel, it's supposed to be known to the audience that she's invisible, or I keep saying that he's invisible, right? The angel is, or the spirit thing is.
Yep.
It would have been funny if one of the characters, obviously she's doing her shenanigans and, doing her thing, but it'd been funny if, like, one of the stage or other people actually, like, knocked her out or something. Like, she just, like, falls, and so, like, we can all kind of see that happen, but the other characters don't, and then they're kind of, like, tripping over it. I don't know. That would be more engaging than...
Yeah.
I don't know. Some sort of, like...
it's more a comedy, right?
Yeah. I don't know. So, something along those lines. But to bring it back here, I have one of these other Prospero little bits here. I forget which scene this is, but he says... You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air. And, like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, all which inherit shall dissolve. And, like the unsubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and of our little life is rounded with a sleep. Sir, I am vexed. Bear with my weakness. My old brain is troubled. Be not disturbed with my infirmity, if you be pleased. Retire into my cell, and there be repose, blah, blah, this, whatever. Eternal I'll walk to still my beating mind. Yeah, that was good. Obviously, we are such stuff as dreams are made of. That's a famous line too. So that was in good context with a proper character.
Yeah.
But I obviously underlined the great globe itself. But it's cool that it's in the same line as it's the solemn temples, the great globe itself, because Francis Yates is all saying like the globe and the theaters are based on Roman temple sort of architecture, blah 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 stuff or whatever. And that even that the concept of the theater and the poet and the stuff is very religious in a sense too, So
yes.
So yeah, that was a cool line. But once again, and so yeah, everything like you said, everything converges. Prospero is just come to Monte Cristo. Nope, I got this all tied up or whatever. And then I guess his brother Antonio, the one who basically got him stuck on this place, is just like, oh, my bad, bro. Like,
yeah,
I think that's what happened.
Like, literally, it's like, I feel bad for doing that, and Prospero's like, it's all right. Like, I was gonna kill you, but I don't want to, and so everything's fine. And it's like, What? That's our conflict resolution?
And then Caliban, Trinculio, and Stefano, they're trying to murder Prospero, and they obviously failed, or they got stuck. Ariel trapped them doing something else or whatever.
But like at some point, I think that part of why there's a lame conflict resolution there, and partly why there's Antonio's just a lame villain at all, is Prospero's too darn powerful. Like, Prospero doesn't need to kill Antonio. He could get his vengeance on Antonio and put Antonio away. But why? He doesn't even need to. Antonio is impossibly not a threat to Prospero anymore. Prospero is now so wholly, omnipotently powerful through his own, genius and Ariel's, magic that, like, does he actually need to worry about Antonio? Hasn't he shown he's so wholly superior to all of them that, like, I think they would be, out of their minds to try to, and so it's like, and I'm sure Antonio, like, is he gonna like Prospero now? No, like, so it's like, it's almost like this let bygones be bygones. Things are still like where they were. It's just now people have to recognize Prospero for what he is. He is this great thing. This isn't even about Miranda and Ferdinand. Like, no, they are themselves like a token to Prospero's power. He made them immediately fall in love, and he knew they would. Like, all he needed was, I think I can get Ferdinand to land on this island, and I can get them to fall in love at the exact right amount of time that I need them to. Like, what a cocky... and so, like, at some point, like, the strength is the weakness of this play, because the strength of this play very much is, beyond the neat little Caliban Trinculo scenes, like, it's the Prospero character. He's the cool character. He's the cool wizard. He's the one that's given so many of the cool lines and cool speeches. And, when we talk about the cool stuff like Sycorax, it's Prospero talking about it. Like, he's the connection between all these characters. So, yes, Prospero is what makes this play so awesome. But I think it's also bizarrely sort of the limiting factor when talking about just, if we have to just rank these, it's not going to be in my top 10. It's just not. What I did want to say, my own hot take when I started reading it, I was a little, like, shocked and fascinated at how Disney it feels. Like, so much of Shakespeare has all these layers of subtlety, and you never even quite know which reading to take. Like, why did Iago do all that stuff? And, like, was Iago doing it because he's racist, or because he's jealous, or is it something different? Is he doing this just to be a sociopath and manipulate? Like, there's all this subtlety and just, like, question, and like, there's so little of that in this Tempest, which, yeah, there's other Shakespeare plays that seem a little simple like that structurally and through character. The structure's too simple. The characters are maybe a little thin or tropey, but, like, those are ones like Winter's Tale and Kimberlin where the poetry's not very good. Like, just the lines themselves aren't like, this one we do get, like, this is clearly the same person that's writing some of the great speeches in all, like, but we're not getting that happening at this structural.
They got their word guy, but they didn't get the plot guy in there or something, Because, the dramatic tension the only person who can probably go toe-to-toe with Prospero would have been the Sycorax character, right? The sort of foil to his white magic, but, she's just not there.
That's not where this goes.
Not a problem, not there. Oh, you get to deal with her little, home incel, like, son or whatever, like, and failure son. Like, they lived in her basement.
It's partly why people don't call it a comedy. People call it a romance, and those other ones that I named, they call them romances to sort of differentiate them from the normal definition of comedy. That said, like, you open the folio, it says it's a comedy. It's the first one listed in the comedy plays. Like,
weird.
And so, like, it is treated as a comedy. That said, comedy could just basically just meant a story with a happy ending. At some point, we get the distinction with a history play that a history play, as long as it's about a factual event, it doesn't matter if it goes well or poorly for the main characters. It's just a history play. You can call it a tragedy if you want. You can call it a comedy if you want, but it's a history play. Whereas, yeah, comedies are supposed to be this. It can be anything from just a tragedy that ends with has a good ending to out and out rollicking farce that makes you laugh till you're crying. Anything like that could be counted as a comedy, and that's why this gets included. But yeah, it seems to me a little more structurally set, like with the character setups, to have more power if this was done as a more forceful, dark, revenge tragedy. This could have been way more gnarly, but like this is also, we're past that dark revenge. Like we've gone beyond that peak. We've already had Hamlet, the Malcontent, Macbeth, Coriolanus, King Lear. Like those have all Timon of Athens, to where Timon of Athens is almost like a parody on that. Like how much farther do we need to go with this dark revenge thing? And so you can see that they're still working with the same kind of dark revenge things, but they're trying to find new ground. And it's like, well, let's go into something fantastical, more visual. And so, like, I can understand it. Maybe it's just quite simply that we've peaked, That, like, for better or worse, it is what guitar is, like, circa 69, 70, 71, 72. That, like, yeah, Page has done The Song Remains the Same. Like, how much farther can we go? Like, Hendrix has already been here. Zappa's laid down his stuff. Like, how much better does it get? And, sure enough, we move away from the guitar into other kinds of things. And guitar still has its role and plays a role long beyond the point of, guitar still even being sort of cool or relevant in the way that it was, like into the 80s when everything synth machines, Michael Jackson still got guitar on Beat It, but by and large, guitar's gone, it's a gone thing. And so, like, I think we're seeing that some of these sort of ideas that if this was written 5-10 years maybe earlier, maybe it's something different. But that said, I've also said that there's some things in here that make it seem like it is actually written earlier, and so maybe that's why some of the stuff seems a little simple or thin as well. So yeah, that may still need more unpacking. I guess we can close it off here in a second. Is there any other stuff you want to go into with?
I was going to read a few of these points from the book by Francis Yates, The Occult Philosophy of the Elizabethan Age. He just has a little couple parts here where she's making a case that whoever's writing The Tempest, that Prospero is definitely an image fixing device for John Dee, because if Prospero is this sort of white magician dude who uses he's calling an angel, so Ariel is an angel's name, or so one would think, right?
Interesting.
And that whole point of this age is that it's okay to do summonings and stuff like that, to talk to spirits, because if you're just invoking angels, you're good to go, because you can't. Angels always good, you can't summon an angel to do a bad thing. So as long as you're like pure of heart or whatever, that your magic will be good.
Yeah.
And so let's see.
Which oddly, again, this touches on Mormon philosophy, right? Earlier I brought up Mormonism with the racial thing, but like John Dee's whole talking to angels thing, that's totally reused and co-opted by Joseph Smith, right? And Joseph Smith,
right?
Yeah, communing with the angel Moroni, right?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Moroni's just the repackaged version of Uriel or Ariel. Not to step on anybody's theological beliefs if they are Mormonism or followers of Mormonism, but like Joseph Smith is very much being influenced by John Dee directly and indirectly. But Ariel is totally, another version of Uriel, which, is an angel. Gabriel, any of these, Michael, like El is an angel name. It means of God.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't even think about that while reading it. And sorry, also on the name Ariel, going back to the Disney thing that I was talking about.
Yeah, right.
Ariel, that name's totally repurposed. I think, I don't know if Hans Christian Andersen uses that in The Little Mermaid, and that comes from, he's the one taking it from Shakespeare, or if Disney takes his thing and then places the Shakespeare name. I don't know.
Good question.
But I also wanted to point out the whole Ariel getting set free thing. Maybe that's Little Mermaid getting the tail thing, but no, Genie getting his cuffs off at the end and I'm free at last. Like, that's like the same scene.
Yeah.
And then, of course, also just if the Tempest got released now, we would call it a Disney princess movie, right? Like, Miranda's definitely a Disney princess that gets Prince Charming to come, fall in love with her, and like, she's got the, very much like most of these Disney princesses, some absentee mother and some power broker father figure, whether it's the Sultan and Jasmine or Cinderella's dad, or like, that's almost always the setup in the Disney princess thing. So like, I don't know, the Tempest just got this real kind of like, and that's why maybe to us it seems so simple and elementary and like I said, insipid or tropey, but like, it's maybe kind of defining a lot of this, and it's hitting these fairy tale things without having this exact codified understanding of fairy tales like we do now. This post Grimm Brothers, post Hans Christian Andersen, it's like it's doing that, and like I'd like to go out on a limb and say, I bet those two, like Grimm Brothers or Hans Christian Andersen, I bet Tempest is one of their favorites. Like, it's got to be, right? Like, maybe even Joseph Smith. I don't know. Continue.
In The Masks in honor of Prince Harry, the prince appears in an Arthurian setting as descendant of ancient British kings, reviver of chivalry, aided by the magic of Merlin, who rises from his tomb to assist the fairy prince and his subjects, the nation of the Fays. The Spencerian fairyland becomes the ideal world of the fairy prince, who is continuing the traditions of the Elizabethan fairy queen. The sudden death of the prince in 1612 was a fearful blow to his supporters. The Tempest was produced before the Princess Elizabeth as one of the shows in the festivities celebrating her marriage to the Elector Palatine, the Protestant wedding, much misliked by the pro-Spanish interests. Thus, it is within the Elizabethan revival, within the Jacobean age, that the Tempest, performed in 1611-12, first printed in 1623, presented in Prospero, Magus, and Conjurer, Shakespeare's last words on the occult philosophy. That Prospero's magic reflects the influence of Agrippa's De Occulta Philosophia was indicated by Frank Kermode in 1954 in his introduction to the Arden edition of The Tempest. Other studies have argued that the presentation of a D-like Agrippan Magus was part of the Elizabethan revival. The magical play presents in new and fascinating guise old and familiar arguments. That the magic of Prospero is a white magic is underlined in the emphasis on chastity in Prospero's advice to his daughter's lover and elsewhere in the play. The white and pure magic of Prospero is contrasted with the black magic of the evil witch Sycorax and her son. Prospero is using the De Occulta Philosophia to call on good spirits. The name Ariel is mentioned in Agrippa's book, and he overcomes and controls the bad magic of the witch. Her philosopher, Queen Elizabeth, the white magician Dr. John Dee, is defended in Prospero, the good and learned conjurer who had managed to transport his valuable library to the island. The presence of the Dee-like Magus in the play falls naturally into place as part of the Elizabethan revival. That this was the world to which Shakespeare had belonged, the world of the Spencerian fairyland, the world of John Dee. Prospero, the beneficent Magus, uses his good magical science for utopian ends. He is the climax of the long spiritual struggle in which Shakespeare and his contemporaries had engaged. He vindicates the D science and the D conjuring. He allays the anxieties of the witch craze and establishes white Kabbalah as legitimate. How profound is the change in atmosphere from Lear, the British Spencerian king, abandoned in a storm and mocked by fake demons, to Prospero, firmly in control of his magical island through his white conjuring. It is strange, save for one Italian writer, students of Shakespeare's Tempest have failed to draw attention to the fact that another play about occult sciences appeared at about the same time. This was Ben Jonson's The Alchemist, first performed, so far as we know, by the King's Men, Shakespeare's company, in 1610, first printed in 1612. Shakespeare's conjurer, Prospero, is noble, beneficent. Jonson's subtle, The Alchemist, is the charlatan and the cheat. Yet both are drawn from Dr. John Dee. There is an undoubted satirical allusion to Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica in Jonson's play, and Dee's mathematical preface to Euclid is parodied throughout. Jonson pokes very clever fun at alchemists, magicians, mathematicians, scientists, all to him equally ludicrous, and in the end Subtle and his gang are cleared out of the house that they have made the center of their nefarious practices by the returning owner.
Which, if you guys have watched I think it's our Read These 8 Shakespeare Plays episode, I have a little digression about The Alchemist, and that's my favorite comedy of the era, guys. The Alchemist is awesome play, but she's absolutely right. Frances Yates absolutely right to say that it's a complete inversion of Prospero, where Prospero is so wholly capable. Subtle's almost like Falstaff, clearly full of crap. Although it's not even like Falstaff, or Falstaff's clearly full of crap. Subtle does seem to actually know what he's talking about, and does seem to actually have alchemical knowledge, but does he actually use any of it? No, all of his knowledge is used to con other people into thinking that his knowledge is more powerful than it is. And it's this it's almost this how-to of how to be a Dr. Faustus character. Because connect it back to one more thing and steal her thunder, because I'm sure she'll bring up Faust. But yeah, Faustus is given this bargain by the devil, and throughout the play, Faustus is always disappointed, wait, this is the deal, this is the bargain, this is all the power. I thought I'd be this I thought I'd be like Jafar in that scene in Aladdin.
Oh, powerful genius.
Yeah, but no, that's not what I'm getting here. I'm realizing that it's a sham and it's kind of a con artist thing. But the whole time the devil's yeah, dude, that's the same thing. What's the difference? That's my point, is that the sham is the all-powerful genie. You don't get that? And Faustus never quite fully gets it. Subtle gets it. Subtle understands that, and that's what John Dee's getting at. But the Tempest says the same thing, right? Does Ariel actually make a storm happen, or does it just seem like a storm happens, right? Does any actual thing really happen, or is it just something is it some sort of trick? Is Ariel actually invisible and can fly or something, or is it that there's some kind of mechanism that's unseen, and maybe that itself would be part of that spectacle stage portrayal. And it's whoa, how is this illusion happening? That if you're a little kid in the playground and you talk through the pole and then it comes out the other end, maybe they got something like that happening. Oh, how is Ariel in multiple anything like that can all of a sudden become this big kind of illusion or event or spectacle, and I think it would inform some of that. But let me see. You want to keep going?
Yeah, just a little more here, and maybe you'll have your little red flag raised. An influential female member of Subtle's gang is a whore. One of his dupes is a weak-minded poet who is fooled by the gang. They fake a vision for him in which Subtle is disguised as a priest of Fairy, and the Fairy Queen is impersonated by the whore. It is an exact reversal of Decker's Horror of Babylon, an attack on the Spenserian revival. Jonson is writing from the point of view of the reaction, of the enemies of Elizabethanism, of Elizabethan occult science, of Spenser and his fairyland. Yet, and this is the most strange phenomenon, Jonson had himself written the masques in honor of Prince Henry, building up that Elizabethan and Arthurian fairy legend around him. As a possible solution to this problem, it may be suggested that King James, who greatly feared Spain and the Jesuits and was most nervous of his son's Protestantism, oh my God,
Protestantism.
Yeah, might have been not displeased by Johnson's indirect way of sabotaging the cause, which he had publicly supported in the masques. Johnson became a favorite at court and wrote many masques flattering James and insinuating contempt for occultists, alchemists, mathematicians, and Rosicrucians. Then she says that him and Johnson and Marlowe kind of have similar ideas of comparing to Faustus. But his satire is really extremely harsh and threatening. Johnson's switch to alchemy as the main subject of ridicule or reproach reflects the enormous contemporary development of the alchemical side of occult philosophy, already present in Agrippa's work, through the influence of Rosicrucianism. Shakespeare's language in The Tempest is infused through and through with spiritual alchemy and its themes of transformation. Quote from The Tempest, "Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made." Though Shakespeare never wielded a wand, nor thought of him as a magus, he is a magician, master of the spell-binding use of words, of poetry as magic. This was the art in which he was supreme and which Prospero symbolizes. Ben Jonson thought differently of the poet's art. For him, it must be polished by careful criticism. The Alchemist contains warnings against contemporary poets who presume on their own naturals, deride diligence, and utter all they can, however unfitly. This sounds very much like Johnson's normal style of criticism of Shakespeare on, apparently, purely literary grounds. Perhaps it went deeper than in literary surface. Perhaps it was an attack on magical poetry, on poetry inspired by occult philosophy. And she says to finish up this chapter, "This is what I take to be the Shakespearean moment, the hour when the Renaissance begins to pass through the crucible of reaction. Hamlet's melancholy is haunted by these dangers. Lear is overcome by them. Only Prospero reaches a partial solution, and Prospero is a late formulation in creative art of the occult philosophy of the Renaissance."
That's fascinating. Ultimately, it's funny. It's not that being John Dee is the answer. It's like being this portrayal of John Dee is the answer. That this is our way to work to this fairyland being acceptable, being part of our sort of cultural zeitgeist. How can we get to this imaginary fairyland without it being reacted to by puritanicals? So much of all this theater, no matter if we're talking 1580s or 1620s, who are the enemies to the theater? It's Puritans. And so, if Marlowe and Johnson are other ways of handling Puritans, Spencer and Shakespeare are different ways of handling Puritans, but I think all four of them can be answered in some sense by they are you can read them for how to control a Puritan population, and how to make it more or less Puritan population for whatever reasons. But at some point all of them are playing on those sentiments, and going back to Donna Murphy with the Shakespeare-Marlowe continuum, I want people to start looking into the Marlowe-Ben Jonson continuum. Because as Yates is pointing out here, it's not just Faustus and the Alchemist. Sejanus and Tamburlaine, I was reading Sejanus the other day, I was like, dude, this is like Tamburlaine reworked. Sejanus is a Tamburlaine character. And so much of that mindset of the common man seems super applicable in Jonson and Marlowe, although ironically Jonson's somehow supposed to be also this, no, it's got to be reworked over and over and over, and it's got to be very erudite, and it's got to be very classical, whereas Shakespeare's supposed to just be the, just write it for nature and just be whoever you are. Yet, I don't know if you go read Ben Jonson. It's super easy and flows and conversational. Go read some Shakespeare, and it's like, dude, I can't read this. And so, I do want to say that, maybe there's something to this narrative, but that narrative's not fully detailed, and otherwise, I think that narrative's pretty darn arbitrary. and it's something that we've crafted to try and help separate these people who write so darn similarly. So yeah, I'm glad she brings up Ben Jonson and The Alchemist, because that's a fascinating thing, that they are totally inversions of each other. But they are like, I don't know, in like as many ways as like Ben Jonson is undercutting John Dee, like the end of the play, like Subtle and like Doc are like those. Doc Subtle and who's the other one? I forget his name. His assistant. Those are like the best characters. Like they're.
Oh really?
Yeah, they're fantastic. You love them.
You have like.
It's like spending time with Daffy and Bugs. Like, honest to God.
Really?
Yeah, it's that much. That's fun. That's silly. But like, I don't know. In the same way that.
Oh wait. And you're talking about in The Alchemist?
Yeah, Face. Thank you. Face. Subtle and Face.
These names sound like some Thomas Pynchon names.
Yeah. But yeah, Subtle and Face, and Face is hilarious. Subtle's the John Dee character. That said, the Tempest also, like, to me, that may be the moment in, like, when is it that we as a Western Christian culture, when is it that we're allowed to engage with pagan ideas and it like be this sort of okay exploration? It's no longer this, oh, that's satanic, or that's contrary to our thing.
It's heathen.
And it's like, and specifically English Germanic pagan ideas, because like, yeah,
heathen,
like already Westernism and Christianity has swallowed up so many Greek and Roman pagan ideas, but yeah, this English heathen pagan, like, when do some of these things, like, for the longest time, it's, you know, in Beowulf, they're set as contrary to Christian ideologies, and like, you know, yeah, throughout medieval literature and early medieval literature in English, like, it's trying to figure out how to work these pagan ideas into it, but like at some point we do get to early modern English and it's like, no, these are bad things, these are devil worship things, this is witch burning stuff. We get the whole witch craze. It's definitely part of that conversation, and it's like, I think that's maybe why the Tempest can be called so special, is that like it showed witches and it didn't get burned. You know, like as the good guys, like even Alchemist, yeah, as much as Ben Jonson tricks us into having Subtle and Faces as like our main characters and we love them, they are still the bad guys that come up and at the end because they are conning everybody. Like, no, unequivocally, Prospero is a freaking witch. She is a wizard, dark magician, whatever you want to call it, like, and yet he is the hero of the story. How did we get there? And like, yeah, Merlin is definitely a stepping stone, but like, even Merlin gets sort of sometimes cast as this trickster figure, or even like a god type figure that you don't know which way he'll go.
Yeah, you know? Or what? Yeah, what's the ulterior machination behind the whole thing?
This whole, like, you know, Disney Sword in the Stone version of Merlin, Black Cauldron version of Merlin, like, going back to Disney here, but yeah, like, this may be, like, and maybe there's other examples, but this may be the most prominent, most notable example that probably can be traceably, like, shown to, like, without the Tempest, we don't get Tolkien, you know? Without the Tempest, no Harry Potter. We'd just be living in 100% Muggle world. Maybe that's maybe how I want to pitch it to anybody that wants to fully question. And once again, me and you may sound like we totally hated it. We did not. It's a little simpler than I remembered it. I remembered it being a little more epic and there just being way more at stake. But that said, like, yeah, Prospero, some of the language, the poetry is great. Some of the comic scenes are great. I'm sure there are versions of this being staged in film that has some cool portrayals. And ultimately, like, the deeper you dive into this stuff, I think the more that this is maybe not the most entertaining play, but becomes very relevant and important and dense with information.
Socio-historical context or whatever, you know.
And also, I guess I'd be an absolute failure if we end this and I didn't bring up Francis Bacon. Like, this is maybe the biggest Baconian play. Baconians like to quote, like some of the Oxfordians have their standbys, right? Like they love bringing up Timon of Athens or Hamlet or Henry V, right? Like those are some of the ones Oxfordians always. That's the one, but like Baconians. Merchant of Venice and Tempest, Love's Labour's Lost, a few others, but like the Tempest, obviously, like what's the evil brother's name that screws over the guy?
Antonio.
Yeah, what's Francis Bacon's brother's name who may or may not have screwed him over several times in his lifetime? Anthony. And like going along with that, like this whole magic wielding staff guy, yeah, it can be a John Dee stand-in, but Francis Bacon is seen by a lot of people to be the heir to that, and maybe that's circular reasoning because they're getting that through this text. But yeah, Bacon's supposed to be sort of the heir to this Rosicrucian movement and maybe the first, Grand Master of Masonry or Rosicrucian, blah blah blah, and like he could be that Prospero figure that's, letting off his brother, and it may connect also to Elizabeth Stuart and Frederick Palatinate, and there's some other Baconian readings that I'm probably totally bungling here, but I do know the Tempest is like big time Baconian piece, but yeah, like okay, so maybe Bacon is writing the Tempest and is the main one behind the Tempest. Who the heck is Ben Jonson? Because, we're getting to the point where, like, it's starting to become more and more in vogue, I think, at least within these SAC circles, to suggest multiple pseudonymity, to quote Bastian Conrad, that one person can have multiple pseudonyms. And so you're seeing a lot of people saying, yeah, whoever Shakespeare is did write Samuel Daniel and did write Christopher Marlowe and that sort of thing. But I've seen, like, every name under the sun pitched. I still have yet to see one person question the veracity or validity of Ben Jonson being Ben Jonson. And I'm starting to find this absolutely absurd. Like, some bricklayer's son has the most, like, nuanced, descript criticisms of John Dee and John Dee's stuff. Like in a perfect reaction to The Tempest, which may or may not be written by Francis Bacon, the smartest guy ever, then who the heck is Ben Jonson?
Yeah.
But once again, both of those writers are just writers of the Kingsman. So it could be that people are having it gotten to the Kingsman, and that they're just actors of the Kingsman. Their names get to get put on it, or blah 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 blah. So, okay. Yeah.
I guess I guess we'll just maybe keep this as like a primer part 1 for this, because I feel like we didn't even
we get to discuss
authorship or whatever, or this is sort of our first pass, or sort of like spotting stuff out, and like we're still trying to put all this other context about this other stuff we literally just talked about before even trying to figure out exactly, but
so maybe
obviously
obviously 2 on this, we could walk through like a scene or an act or something and do some actual real in-depth close readings like we've done on some of the poems and essays. But I think this is a good little stopping point. Also, it's getting rather late over here. We've done a double recording tonight because we wanted to try and get 2 shorter pieces out, although this one's turning longer. Because we did that poll a few weeks or months back that y'all said, okay, yeah, we like y'all's long stuff, but maybe some 30 minute to an hour, and so we're trying to get a few of those out there. And so thanks for sticking around. Thanks for tuning into our Tempest talk. Go read The Tempest yourself. go check out Julie Taymor's film version of The Tempest. No, go check out her version of Titus. Like, I'm not a big fan of Titus's, like, the play itself. It's fun and it's wacky and it's silly and it's got some cool moments, but it's kind of poorly written and it's weird. But like, I don't know, Julie's take on it works. Like, you know, like the bad animation and the weird costume stuff and the bad music, like, that fits for Titus. It doesn't fit for this perfect Disney, like, white magic, like her little, some of her punk rock stuff.
Ironically, white magic, white people casting white.
And like, there's probably something to that take, and she's probably something like Ben Johnson. One of his famous masks, which mask is like this. This plays a lot like a mask. A mask is, you know, it's not just this spectacle. Like, it can be more interactive, and it's not always totally plot defined, and it can have like games and stuff in it.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and masks are neat. And you know, supposedly Bacon writes masks, and but Johnson was the mask writer, and that's what Yates was talking about. That's how he gets in so good with King James and Queen Anne. But one of his most famous ones is, and the masks often feature a lot of the top aristocratic ladies, and so the queen and her favorites, but her favorites are often like whoever's the most powerful dudes, their wives or daughters or nieces or something. And just so happens in James's era, a lot of those women are women from that extended Sydney circle. And so, you know, Lucy Bedford or Anne Clifford or you know, Mary Roth or Mary Sidney. And so there's this one mask where all these women are like all the characters in it, and they all dress up and they all represent, I forget, it's different places or different emotions, or no, it's different goddesses or something. They're all different goddesses. Like, one's the goddess of wisdom or something like that. But they're all cursed at the start, and they need to be fixed. And the curse is that they're all in blackface.
Oh.
And the mask is called Mask of Blackness. And so it's all like the richest, whitest ladies of England doing all this like song and dance in blackface until they can be cured of their curse. And like, they literally would go into this line, and I forget if it was King James or somebody, but he'd have like this bowl and he'd uncurse them and wash them, and it's like, oh, okay, so like, yeah, you know, some of these post-colonial claims about old literature totally stand. Like, Toni Morrison's not wrong what she says about, you know, Tolkien or Beowulf or Shakespeare or any of them. But that said, like, that is a nuanced conversation, and that may be difficult to pull off the cuff like Julie Taymor's trying to do in the Tempest version.
Yeah, you already have to have some context for it to be received well. Yeah.
Please, for the love of God, like, yeah, trigger warning. I don't know.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I think that's a cool place to end it. And by the way, I'm fascinated with those conversations. I had like one of my professors at UH, Dr. Lawrence. I forget his full name, but he's the like top post-colonial professor of minority literature at UH, and dude's a freaking genius, and he's one of my favorite professors ever. And I'm always up for those weird kind of post-colonial conversations that a lot of people find uncomfortable. You know, as Dr. Lawrence would say, Dr. Lawrence was a middle-aged African-American man. He said, well, you as a white guy should be pretty easy for you. It don't matter what you, like, and it's like, okay, yeah, and he's right. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy going there, and I like linking that with Shakespeare, some of that classical stuff. A lot of people have trouble linking some of this modern, new PC take on literature versus some of this old classical elitist stuff, and so let's bridge those gaps, you know? So, yeah, Tempest might be a cool way to do it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, well, drop a comment about how much you like the Tempest, or what do you think the next one. Maybe we should, dive in on your recommendation. But otherwise, we will leave it at that. And as always, read the text, nullius in verba.